right. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you may be. Thank you for joining us. Another episode of Catching Up with Jacob. And in not an undisclosed location, and a not very secure location, Jacob Prash.
Blessings in Jesus. Wonderful to be here. But it's going to be even better when we get out of here.
Amen. Welcome, Jacob. God bless you, brother. And down in the South, David Lister, how are you?
Well, I'm not in the South. I'm above the Mason-Dixon up in Pennsylvania. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Actually, in Greensburg, Pennsylvania.
Welcome, David. Welcome, David.
Good to be here.
Another brother from the South, Sandy Simpson. How are you, brother?
Yeah, I am in the South, man.
Yeah.
I'm just really happy to be with you guys today, and blessings to all.
God bless you, Sandy. Thanks for joining us today. And Jay, mostly on the Pacific Coast, but you're not in the Pacific Coast today. You're in the middle of the country. How are you, Jay?
I am in the belt buckle of the Bible Belt in the great state of Texas.
All right. Well, that's my hometown. Well, not Houston, but Abilene. But anyway, welcome nonetheless. God bless you, Jay. And we want to welcome all those who are watching live and those who will watch later. Catching Up with Jacob episode. What are we now, Jay? 202?
202. Yes.
Incredible. Thank you. Thank you for that. And we will be not only catching up with Jacob and Sandy and David and Jay and myself, but we're also going to go backstage and we're going to be dealing with, so we got a lot of questions and we got lots of topics to discuss today. So we want to get started very quickly. Before we do, just a quick announcement, Jacob, of the conference and where we're going to be at in November, because it'll be a great time with you up in Scotland and England.
Okay. Well, the England conference at Yarnfield is completely booked out. We can't take any more bookings. It's filled up. They gave us the largest facility they have, and it's filled up. And because of fire regulations, we couldn't get anyone else in, even with a shoehorn. So England is finished, if you haven't already registered. However, there are places in Scotland, and Scotland will have the same lineup of speakers. It'll be Marco, Tim Leach, and myself. And it will also be a prophecy conference, albeit with different subjects and a different format than England. It won't be the same subjects, which is prophecy and velocity in Yarnfield, England. It's going to be a different kind of prophecy conference in which I'm going to be outlining the thesis of my next book, Born in a Manger, Coming in a Cloud. And we're also going to have an extended Q&A format, where questions will be interactive, where it won't just be you're limited to ask one brief question about something that was heard in the presentations. You can ask any question from any tape or recording or book authored by myself or recorded by Marco or Tim. It'll be an open format. So it's going to be a different kind of prophecy conference. We can do that in Scotland because the Scottish conferences are, of course, smaller than the England ones. The England one, as though, is completely booked out. The Scotland conference, we assure you, will be qualitatively good as well, and there are places left. Just previous to that, on the 24th of October, I am due to be in Newton Abbey with Pastor Stephen Tremble at Calvary Pentecostal Church at 7 p.m., Newton Abbey, next to Belfast. On the 25th, 26th, and 27th, I'm with Pastor Marty Foster. We have a men's meeting in Bangor on Friday, the 25th. The 26th and 27th, I'm at Agape Christian Fellowship on Orangefield Crescent, again with Pastor Marty Foster. On the 28th, I will be in the Republic of Ireland, County Donegal, in Ballybuffet at Jackson's, 7 p.m., on the 28th, Ballybuffet. After that, we have the Scottish Conference the first weekend in November, the 1st to the 3rd. Pastor Marco from California, Pastor Tim Leach from England, and yours truly from wherever I happen to be at the time. The English conference will be a week after that, but that is entirely booked. Thank you, Marco.
Thank you so much, Jacob. And Sandy, I wanted, since you were here last time, I wasn't here. I was in Canada. Missed you. Welcome back to Catching Up. When I'm here, I guess it's a bit different When I wasn't here, I didn't get a chance to say hi. But can you remind everybody where they can find you on the internet, where they can find you, your website, and your YouTube channel?
You can find my my videos on Act TV on YouTube, and also Act TV on RTN .org. So check those out there. All the Bible studies that we're doing are also up there. And my main website is at Deception in the Church, that's all one word, .com. And I keep up with a lot of the things that are going on in the church and in the world. And it's updated daily. So come and check that out at the What's New page, and you can keep up with what's happening there.
And if you have never gone to that website, so those who are watching, and you go to Deception in the Church, and you will find great resources. In fact, it's for mostly David. David's told me, David and I, we sent people there because you want to know about this, you want to know about that, or a certain false teacher or their doctrine, and got a plethora of information, and it's very good stuff.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for being with us. David Lister, got any announcements?
Well, we've had a bit of trouble for our Thanksgiving conference down there. The hotel we're at is flooded, so we've had to move to the country club, not too far away. So we're putting up new information on the website. If you're planning on coming, we've contacted most people we know about, but please check it out. Need to move over. There's 2 hotels we put up there that you can stay at. They're actually $20 to $30 a day less, so it'll be good. But they have buffets, stuff like that. So please check.
Crystal River, Florida, north of Tampa.
Very good. Thank you so much, David. Appreciate it. And we want to remind everyone that not only can you catch us here, Memorial.tv and memorialtv.org, but also on Rumble, also on YouTube, also on Facebook, also on Vimeo, also on Telegram. So lots of places to go, and you're not just limited to one, and that's very good. And with the increasing amount of we'll talk about that today, the UN censorship. So a lot of these platforms may become very difficult to navigate. And that's why, and you keep us in prayer, we're updating our website, and it's going to be better than what we have now. So praise the Lord for that. Also want to let everybody know our podcast continues. And so you can find us on various different platforms, and you go to the Memorial.org page, you can find us there. And also the Memorial channel on YouTube has all the links for the podcast. And we're on the major ones, iTunes and Spotify. And you can find us there. So lots of stuff, lots of audio, lots of good stuff you can share. If you want more information about missions and things that Memorial is involved, especially in Israel, go to memorial.org and go to the missions page. So we appreciate that. With all that said, let's catch up. Jacob Prash, it is Feast of Trumpets. The Jews call it today in Israel. They call it
Happy New Year.
Shana Tova and all that stuff, right? So just really brief, because people just began to watch Moriel and things like that, and they haven't really caught on to some of your teachings on that. Remind us of your teachings on the fall feast, and also that this is not Happy New Year.
The biblical and the rabbinic. The rabbinic is false. The biblical is, of course, true, what we see in the Torah. It is called Yom Teruah, not Rosh Hashanah. Rosh Hashanah means the head of the year. And we are told in the book of Exodus that the head of the year is the first of Nisan. It's in the spring. The rabbis changed the Jewish New Year to Rosh Hashanah. Biblically, however, it is the Feast of Trumpets, Yom Teruah. And the trumpets are sounds of warning. This is consistent. It's in the book of Joel. It's in the book of Amos. It's in the book of Zephaniah. When the people hear the blast of the trumpet, they'll know it's a warning. Will they not tremble? The actual symbolic significance and prophetic significance of the Feast of Trumpets is not Rosh Hashanah, of course. It's not the New Year. But it is rather the commencement of the days of awe, that 10-day period leading up to Yom Kippur. Now, these autumn holy days, called the high holy days generally, will have a literal fulfillment after the rapture with the return of Christ, when he comes not aerially in the rapture, but terrestrially to establish his messianic kingdom. The same as he fulfilled Passover and Pentecost on the exact days and first fruits on the exact days, he will likewise fulfill Rosh Hashanah, as they call it now, the Feast of Trumpets, Yom Teruah, the Days of Awe, and Yom Kippur, and then the Feast of Tabernacles representing the millennium. According to Zechariah 14, he will fulfill these on the exact days in his return. This will be one of the features of my new book, and it will be central to what we're going to be looking at in the new book. But we will be featuring this at the Scottish Conference. It's one of the things going to be featured and addressed at some length at the Scottish Conference, the 1st to the 3rd of November, if you are in the UK. So that is it. They're saying Happy New Year. But you see what's happening in the Middle East. They're on the precipice of an abyss, a possibility of conflict with Iran, possibility of an extended or expanded war, even a possibility of there's nuclear threats taking place. Yet people are saying Happy New Year. It's completely absurd. It is not what the Torah teaches. And it shows how far Talmudic Judaism has gravitated away from the Torah.
Absolutely, Jacob. Thank you so much. And I don't remember the title of the audio or the video that people can access, but I believe it's called the Fall Feast.
You want a Feast of Israel? Yes.
I don't Feast of Israel. So people can grab a hold of that. I know it's on YouTube for sure. I don't know if it's on our Memorial TV necessarily, but I know you can find it on audio. And you can find it on YouTube as well for free. So access to that. And there's also the spring ones that goes along with that one as well. But we've been focusing on Rosh Hashanah and the Fall Feast, which are more coming up. You have Yom Kippur, and you still have the Feast of Tabernacles coming down later in the year. So we'll definitely be keeping an eye on that. And they do have prophetic significance. Jacob talks a lot about that on that audio, so on that video. So please get a hold of that. Jacob, you brought up the Middle East today. Israel says, Netanyahu made no qualms about it. If Iran keeps going down this road attacking Israel as they did this week, nuclear weapons are not off the table. Jacob Prasch, take it away on this incredible threat that Iran against the world, but specifically against Israel, and Israel's now taking this laying down. We saw the barrage of attacks on Tuesday, I believe. Tuesday, yeah, will be in the first. And after Nasrallah was killed, we were still on the air last Friday. Now we confirmed that he has been killed. It's not the first, one from Hezbollah leadership that's been killed, many of them, even from Iran. Now Iran responds, and it was a quad barrage of attack on Tuesday. Go ahead, Jacob.
Well, as we've been saying consistently, Iran is the number one sponsor, the primary sponsor of the Houthis, of Hezbollah, and of Hamas. And the Biden-Harris administration are the number one sponsors of Iran. It began with Barack Obama, who put $150 billion plus into the hands of the Iranians by unfreezing assets, by lifting oil embargoes. Barack Obama funded the expansion of Iranian terror and of nuclear development. He funded it. Donald Trump canceled these policies of the Obama regime and put Iran on its back foot. They were almost bankrupt. But once Biden and Harris came into power, they lifted the Trump embargoes and again began giving hundreds of millions of dollars to Iran by lifting again these oil embargoes and other restrictions. Biden, Obama, Harris have betrayed not just Israel, they betrayed the Western world, and they betrayed America. They have funded Iran. Iran would not be able to do this if it were not for Barack Obama, for Joe Biden, and for Harris. They are the ones responsible. This may sound like a radical statement. It is a factual statement. We've been betrayed by our own government and our own leaders. Israel's been betrayed. Other moderate states have been betrayed. That is what is actually happening. Things are perilous. Now, it is shocking what Biden did yesterday. He was asked, does he support Israel's right to respond by attacking Iran's nuclear development projects? And he said no. He openly told Iran he disagrees with Israel and he wants Iran to continue to pursue the development of nuclear weapons. This is what an evil, if not crazy, but certainly evil man he is, and what a ridiculous figure Harris is. And of course, it comes back to Barack Obama. How anybody in their right mind could vote for such people, and again, I'm not campaigning for Donald Trump. I'm simply stating what they have done and what they are doing. They betrayed us. Now, this is not new. This is not new. This betrayal to Iran is not new. It began with Ronald Reagan providing weapons and rocketry to Iran in the Contragate scandal. It was first Ronald Reagan who did this, and then, of course, tried to deny it, and then, of course, finally admitted that it happened. That was the beginning of it. So it went from Reagan, got worse under Obama, and now has gotten worse still under Biden and Harris. It's our own government's fault that this has happened. But to openly tell Iran, we will not support our ally Israel.
It's horrible.
And let them know what you will support and what you won't. Either this is beyond idiocy. The first time Iran fired 300 projectiles, most of them drones and rockets, Biden pressured Israel not to retaliate. They did something very superficial. He pressured Israel not to retaliate. Now it's the second time Iran has attacked, but this time with ballistic missiles.
Yeah.
That have a 12-minute launch to target time. 12-minute launch to target time. And for the second time, he's telling Israel, don't retaliate. Only in a limited way that we tell you. A proportionate response. Well, what's proportionate? Israel should therefore fire 181 ballistic missiles at Iran, targeting civilian as well as military targets. That would be a proportional response. This is what a stupid man he is, what a senile man he is, but also what a corrupt man he is. And, you know, would still makes him better equipped to be president than Harris. This is what we're dealing with. This is the fault of the United States government. Going back to Reagan, getting much worse under Obama, and much worse still under the present administration. I am not exaggerating. That is political. Now let's look at the political in light of the biblical. As we have said more than a dozen times here on Catching Up, read Daniel chapter 10, the Prince of Persia. Iran would become an existential threat to Israel and come into conflict with Yavan, which meant Europe, Greece, Western civilization at this time. I have no doubt that what we are seeing is, at least in part, an early stage fulfillment of Daniel chapter 10. I have no question that that is what is transpiring. This is what is going on. We are reaping what we sowed.
Yeah, no doubt. If people haven't heard Jacob's message on the Prince of Persia, is a sort of an unknown one. You did it at the church a couple of times a few years back, Jacob, and it was quite good at the time. Even at the time, it was quite good. Now it's even more applicable to what's going on because these things have increased, and our State Department or the UN or whoever gets involved has no idea what they're dealing with. They're not dealing with the mullahs. They're dealing with the spirit behind the mullahs, which is the Prince of Persia. David Lister, what do you think about all these 180 rockets? As Jacob says, the first time they actually shot the Fatah 1 and the Fatah 2, which is hypersonic, is 12 minutes until impact. The drones are about 9 hours. The other ballistic missiles, the cruise missiles, I should say, it's about 2 hours. This one is 12 minutes. So they had very little opportunity to get anything off the ground, especially the jets, but they target civilians as well as military targets. Quite an incredible amount that they shut down, but it still hit some places in Israel. But your thoughts on it?
Well, a weak administration, strong. We have a very weak administration that is trying to tell our allies that are being attacked how they should respond or not respond. And because of this, it's leaving Israel open to destruction and to not being able to protect themselves. And I know Jacob covered some of that, but I've never known that this should happen before with other nations, only with Israel. I mean, I know
standards, right? Two standards.
Yep, two standards. I know that I'm trying to remember. It was Ariel Sharon had the PLO surrounded.
Yeah, 82.
Nixon told him to pull back.
Yeah, it was actually, I don't know if that's the one, but it was Reagan and Baker.
Reagan and Baker, yeah. So look, we're creating more problems. The General Sharon said, if we don't take care of the PLO here, we will have 50 more years of problems.
Oh.
Well, it's 50 more years of problems now.
Yeah.
Now we're going to not stop Iran, who we basically have allowed to be armed, and we keep making bad decisions because our president is mental incompetent right now. 400 days laying on the beach while the world is burning, and unless
those are nice vacations, that nice vacation, maybe
400 days.
Yeah, it's like a year off.
Yeah, but it's nobody does this to any other country. If you were attacked, I think we were talking about if Mexico fired 180 missiles into California. Well, I might not be so upset about certain areas, but we would fire back.
Oh, I definitely. Yeah, yeah.
David, we better be grateful that he's taking 400 days, because if he worked every single one of those days, we'd be in so much deeper of a hole. It'd be ridiculous.
Yeah, because his decisions are crazy, and it's you don't fight a war like this, and we have to let Israel is doing the world a favor by destroying these terrorists, because these terrorists have killed Arabs, have killed Syrians, have killed Christians, have killed Muslims, have killed Jews.
Yeah,
they're a threat to the whole world. And Iran is financing them, and we need, Israel. I don't want to see any life lost of the Persians that are anti the mullahs, but I would like to see the mullahs taken out, and Israel could wipe out the nuclear program as well as knock out all their power stations. And then they could put a stop. They could even put a stop to pumping of oil, which would then break them.
Yeah, no, for sure. For sure.
It would put a halt to a lot of this, because the Hezbollah is impotent right now. They still have some rockets down there, but last night Israel was unmerciful, wiping out these other weapons and things like this. So
yeah. Absolutely. We're going to go to Sandy real quick. Sandy, your thoughts on this? It looks like Israel's being handcuffed again by the Biden administration, providing more money to Iran. They unfrozen assets in the billions. Now they get to do this. Israel's saying, hey, we're going to have to retaliate, perhaps nuclear. The world goes crazy. Biden says, don't do it. Don't do it. In fact, what they're just simply doing is allowing Iran and Hezbollah to regroup again for another attack, which we did see. Besides the rocket attacks, they actually attacked Tel Aviv on foot. 2 gunmen shot down 7 Jewish people, including a mother who was protecting her baby. She was 33 years old. Terrible loss. Sandy, your thoughts on the Middle East is on fire, and I guess the world keeps going, but nobody pays attention to it.
Yeah. I've never seen such incompetence in the leadership of the U.S. I mean, you can't just say don't. and people are going to stop doing what they're doing. I mean, what kind of a world does that guy live in?
Oh
I'm
man.
not going to listen to him.
Did you see that? Did you see that video where he says, "What are you going to tell Iran?"
Don't. Don't what? You know, it's just, I don't think he's actually capable of actually having an opinion and conversation. And of course, it makes you wonder who's actually running our country anyway. It may well be somebody else. But there's no doubt that the people that are there, he and Kamala, are absolutely incapable of the kind of leadership that it takes to actually keep this nation on track and to keep the world safe. And I really applaud Israel for what they're doing. They've got to do it. It's not something that people congratulate them for, but I pray every day that the Lord will allow them to continue to have strong leadership who won't listen to the UN and all these people, you know, just voicing their idiotic ideas, and continue to do what they know they need to do. And so I'm very thankful for that.
Yeah, Jacob.
I hear the answer "don't" was the longest sentence they could memorize, both Biden and Kamala. So,
Jacob, I want to read this quote to you. This is from Biden. He says, "Israel must consider other alternatives other than targeting the Iranian facilities. That would include oil facilities, nuclear facilities, etc." So what other alternatives are there?
To allow them to continue to sponsor terror globally. Again, Biden wrote him a check.
Jacob, is there a shift in the Middle East? They got this quote here from the Gulf states. The Gulf states basically says we're going to be neutral. That includes Saudi Arabia, Oman, and places like that, the UAE, the United Arab Emirates. They're not going to play one side or the other. They don't. Obviously, they are fearful of Iran, but they're actually taking a neutral stand. They are, though, in favor of Lebanon. They said they stand with Lebanon against Israel. This is Qatar. So there's a shift in the Middle East, seemingly. I was listening to bin Salman, the Prince of Saudi Arabia, who says the Palestinians, well, I don't really have much to say about that. They don't even allow me to go into their mosque and pray and speak. So he doesn't seem to have much love for the Palestinian people, but he's also taking a neutral stand in this.
The Saudi Arabians have no love for the Iranian-backed Hezbollah. When they say they support Lebanon, they mean the non-Hezbollah elements of the Lebanese government. That's what they mean.
Yes.
They don't, remember, there were people celebrating. There were Sunni Muslims. There were Christians, there were Druzes celebrating the Israeli killing of Nasrallah a few days ago. They were celebrating it. There were celebrations that he was killed by the Israelis in Syria. There were celebrations he was killed even in Iran. The Saudis have no love for Hezbollah. They're just being their usual hypocrite self.
Yeah, David Lister, we'll go back to you. Israel attacked an air base in Syria, and Russian weapons were in there. There's like a Russian weapons depot, seemingly. Now Russia says they're warning Israelis, Russian citizens in Israel, I should say, to get out of Israel. Putin does not want to talk to Netanyahu at this point. This were attacks on the base, seemingly from airspace, like an air attack, and also from the Mediterranean, which they concluded might have been Americans who shot that thing in there. So that's gearing up the Middle East. And another way, Russia, who backs Iran, it's very angry at the fact that Israel is backed by the U.S. So now you got a conflict, not a confliction, but a congruent of attacks now. Russia's involved in Ukraine war. Russia's involved in the Iranian war now. Now it's getting closer to home. Your thoughts? Am I not hearing David Lister, or is it just me?
He's got his mic off.
Okay, he's got his mic off.
Yeah, there we go.
There you go.
I believe Putin said that he believed this was a ship-to-ground missile. And so they're theorizing it was America that fired this, but though there's no one confirming that. But this is pulled, and he's said now, I think for number 18 or 19, that he may be using nuclear missiles or nuclear bombs, because we're just coming closer and closer to chaos. That's the thing with war. All it takes is one shot at the wrong person, and a world war can happen. And I think he's getting tired of it. He's being pushed around by many within NATO and the Ukraine. And like Jacob has made the point, he has no way out now, because everybody is starting to say that Ukraine's going to be part of NATO, and that puts us on his border, which is something he doesn't want. And so we're rolling downhill, man, and it looks like the momentum is speeding up.
Yeah, because even Israelis, the Israelis hit 15 Houthi targets this couple of days. So in Yemen,
Syria, all those missiles were Russian, but the Russians have been involved with the supplying all sorts of stuff into Israel in the caves. I mean, not the caves, but I'm sorry, the tunnels underneath Gaza and all that. Russian weapons everywhere. So this is not the first time that Russian weapons are found in the midst of this war.
Well, the 67 war, the 73 war, even earlier than that, Russians were always supplying weapons. In fact, I think they flew
going back to Nasser, as Jacob talked about earlier.
Yeah, they flew some of the planes were Russian pilots that were attacking Israel.
I know, one last thing. I know that American pilots were very concerned about the Iranians' aircrafts that they were flying to hold them off. They were F-4s, which I think we used in Korea and Vietnam, but also F-14s. So they were not very concerned about the Iranian aircraft.
Yeah, Sandy, we'll go to you real quick. The war seems to now overlap with the Ukrainian war. Now, NATO has been involved, obviously, for some time. They just named a new Secretary of NATO, Mark Rutte from Netherlands. He's definitely anti-Israel. He's definitely part of this whole global agenda to destroy Israel. But is it at this point that I think for believers to really think about this and say, we have to pray, man. We have to pray that this doesn't involve the whole world. It's seeming it's pulling everybody in.
Yes. Well, that's what happens when you have ineffective leadership that doesn't think through the ramifications, that who will not stand up for what's right. And of course, we know that really all they understand is peace through strength. So we have to do some things, and for better or for worse, we need to elect Donald Trump. I am not trying to do a commercial for him, but he's the only guy there that actually has plans to deal with these situations. And I think that he can actually do some things that would change some of this situation that's going on right now. The Democrats won't, that's for sure. So we need Republicans in there. We need a Republican Senate and House and a Republican president to change things around. And it can be done, but it's going to be a mammoth effort to get some of these things taken care of.
Yeah, the heads of state, Jacob, we'll go back to you. Heads of state of the UK, Canada, and the U.S., of course, really, trying to get Biden to actually allow Ukraine to use long-range missiles into Russia. We already know that Steimer met with Biden regarding their own missiles. I think they're called the Shadows. I think it says it's a Shadow missile. I think that's what they're called. And of course, Trudeau gave the green light. Stone Shadows.
Yes.
Yeah, and Trudeau gave the green light. So that's overlapping now because you have both the U.S. involved and NATO.
It's a British missile.
Yeah. No, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about Trudeau gave the green light.
Yes, yes.
Yes, Trudeau gave the green light, not regarding the British missiles, but his own green light, whatever that means. Well, we know he's incompetent as well. But your thoughts, Jacob? This is an overlapping war now. Russia is on both sides of
Got
these.
to the point where the NATO powers no longer believe that Putin can be taken at his word concerning his threats to use nuclear power because of what it would mean in terms of his relationship with China, who's warned him not to do it, and because of the ramifications it would have for Russia itself. He's talking dangerously. When anyone has talked that dangerously in Russia in the past, well, there was one person who did, and it was obviously Nikita Khrushchev. He was deposed. He was deposed by the Politburo for talking the way that Putin is talking now during the Cuban Missile Crisis. Well, I think NATO says we've called his bluff. He's not going to do anything of a nuclear nation. They just don't believe the threat is real. I'd like to believe that.
Yeah.
It is too dangerous of a weapon to take for granted.
Correct.
Even though we're only talking tactical nukes, we're not talking about strategic weapons.
Right. Hey, Jacob, I wanted to ask you this because there was one organization that supposedly was formed to prevent all this, which is the United Nations back in the late 40s, right? Supplanting the League of Nations by Woodrow Wilson and after World War I. But now they have a new pact because they've been so ineffective. It's called Pact to the Future. Almost sounds like a movie. And what it means is that there will be no longer sovereign nations. There were no longer sovereign nations, but basically a block of nations making these decisions, and they don't want any rogue agents. Perhaps they were meaning, the former president of the United States who tried to get rid of them. And but one of the things that they're targeting is sovereign nations. The other thing that they're targeting is the fact that there'll be no free speech, as you've heard John Kerry speak. Free speech and the First Amendment is a stumbling block to the U.S. We're the only ones who have it, so it's a stumbling. We can't really govern with this nuisance.
If there was a Nobel Prize for hypocrisy, John Kerry basically get it. He's used the terms people going to news sources of their own that are not mainstream media. He defined these other news sources that are not mainstream media. That if you go somewhere else other than NBC, ABC, CBS, New York Slimes, Washington Compost, it's USA Today, or Voice of America, or BBC, or CNN, or MSNBC, those are the main ones, that you're sick. The other ones are sick.
Yes.
Now, what makes them sick is they're sick because they don't follow the narrative of the mainstream media. They're independent thinking and independent analyzing and independent reporting. So that means sick. If you think independently and critically and don't follow the prescribed narrative, you're sick. The second term he's used is that they have an agenda. What he really means when he says they have an agenda is they don't subscribe to his agenda.
Exactly.
Of course, right?
That man, Kamala Harris is co-equally hypocritical, but she's obviously not that intelligent. Kerry, he's not a stupid person. He's just a corrupt person.
I agree with that for sure. And he's spearheading this. I mean, he's at the summit, Impact Meetings 2024, and he's talking all this stuff like, well, maybe he's still bitter about losing the presidency.
What he is the ambassador to Davos. He's the ambassador to the WEF.
Yeah, great guy that they would pick. David Lister, the UN agenda, which is this Pact to the Future. I'll just read some of the things that they have. They want the one world government. That's true. You want to call it that. They want the end of sovereign nations. They want a one army, one world army. They want basically a central bank, a world central bank, a cashless currency, no private property. A lot of it is overlapping with the WEF, with the World Economic Forum. Social media ID, censorship through AI, implementation of credit system. I mean, it's the same things we've been talking about, but now they're on record. People go check it out. And 143 plus nations voted for this. Some nations did not want it. Very few did not want it. Obviously, you can find out how the U.S. voted. They voted yes for this. So all the businesses run by the state, 50-minute cities, et cetera, go down the list. This is frightening.
Yes. What got me upset is they said I can't own my pets no more. Look, I know I'm being funny because this is so sad. You know, we hear all them talk about Trump and the rights are a threat to democracy. If you read this, there's no more democracy if you read this list. This is total control of the population by a few people at the top, autocrats, controlling your whole life. There's only one government, and that's a world government. That's the first, I believe that's on the top of the list, isn't it?
Yeah.
One world government. So this is what the Bible said is coming. This is what these guys want to happen. And this is a dangerous threat to the United States. And with our government having signed it, it's people should wake up to this and make sure that they put people and politicians in office that are against this, because this is the end of our lives as we would know it. Not be able to get online unless you have a digital ID, not be able to travel unless you have you've been chipped. I believe that's what
it's not chipping. Yeah, microchip for health, shopping, and travel.
Yep. So
with that eventually comes social credit scoring for sure.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's all in there.
Yeah.
So this everything they're saying about the people on the right, that they're threatening democracy. These people have said with this document, just this broad titles says this is the end of democracy, that your constitutional right to have free speech here in America, your right to not incriminate yourself, because they have AI trials.
Yeah.
You will have a machine tell you that you're guilty. And also John Kerry wants us to only go to one place to have the right information.
Right.
And he seems to be, I think, wanting to be the head of the Ministry of Truth.
Yeah, of course.
Well,
You know, I can't believe we've come so far so fast.
Yes.
You know, we're basically talking about a whole world that's turning communist, socialist, and Marxist. And but I think back to Babel with Nimrod and Semiramis, and hey, you know, God said we need to go down there and confuse the languages, because otherwise they'll be able to do what they want to do. And what they wanted to do was the same thing: set up a one world government. And I'm sure that many of them, even though they weren't in the ancient world, they knew what happened. They knew why God judged the ancient world. And yet here they are a couple hundred years afterwards, and they're trying to do it again.
Yep.
And God had to disperse them. And thankfully he did that, or otherwise we would have had this global government way back then.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Jacob, I want to go to you real quick, because in the EU, and it's kind of an unknown, it went under the radar with so much stuff going on, and I could understand that there's so much going on. We can't hardly keep track of every single item, but there's one that I think it's really interesting. It's called the Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive. Sounds so fun, right? Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive is basically a law in the in the EU, in which basically it's like an ESG scores. All these companies have to, by law, not just by choice, but by law, have to oblige with things like LGBTQ, things like climate change. I think, it's basically on steroids, because it's a law now. These are companies that have to do it. they're not going to be handled by hedge funds and things like that. This is now a law with the EU government. And if you don't do it, your social credit score will go down. These companies are going to have to do it. It's going to affect the way people buy, the way they purchase things, what they buy, what they purchase, what they see, because obviously it affects news items and news outlets. So being so close to Europe yourself, and being there I think you were there last month. Where do you see this going? The EU is on a fast track. I'm not saying the US is not catching up, but it's on a fast track to this.
Well, there's two aspects of this that we have to bear in mind. First of all, the European Parliament is not a parliament or a congressional body. It is an advisory body with no real legislative power per se. The laws are made by the Brussels bureaucracy and the Council of Europe. So it is not a law that was passed by any democratic process. Okay? It was
Absolutely.
not a law passed by democratic process. That's the first thing. Second thing we have to understand is there's already been major litigations in Europe over international tax policies, where American corporations doing business in Europe, particularly high tech, particularly Silicon Valley and Seattle-based high tech companies, Americans, have been dragged into European courts because they're not complying with European laws. What they will attempt to do is to force American-based multinationals, particularly in the high tech sector, to obviously abide and observe these same laws in Europe. So although it may be IBM, or although it may be Ford Motors, it may be from the it may be Microsoft, it may be whatever it is going to have to abide by the same European laws. So that's the way it works. Once it begins to take place on the multinational corporate level, there's going to be a political movement in America to eventually do the same thing. Not necessarily by the same processes, but they'll get away with much as they can by executive order already. What the European Union does, the Council of Europe does with its regulations, is what the United States government does with executive orders. The difference is if you have a different president who's ideologically adverse to the sitting president, he can cancel them all with a stroke of the pen.
Yes.
And in Europe, it's much, much more difficult, much more difficult to do that. So that is what you're dealing with. They're forcing the same-sex agenda. Now, just look at the United States. I have no agreement theologically with Roman Catholicism, but there have been Roman Catholic institutions, hospitals, religious orders who have been basically persecuted.
Yeah,
By the Justice Department, and the Justice Department saying traditional Catholics are should basically be on a terrorist watch list. He says, that's what they're saying. And again, Biden, Pelosi, these people are Catholics. Means nothing to them, of course. It's just politics. But to the Catholics who do believe in Catholicism, they're already being similarly persecuted and being forced to conform to things in the area of pro-life and so forth that are being dictated by the federal bureaucracy. So it's happening in America, too, in a different way. In Europe, it's just easier because there's no parliament that's a real parliament. It's an advisory body. It's a rubber stamping body. It's the only difference.
Yeah, and it's speeding up really quick. I wanted to talk to David real quick. David, Anthony Blinken, we watched that video. It didn't play that long, but if you watch the whole thing, it's about 30 minutes if you can stomach it. But what he does mention is the fact that he likes the UN approach to censorship through AI, and he wants to bring this into the United States. It's already there to some degree or another. They got that pesky constitution they need to get around, and they're working on a program to run AI throughout the whole internet, basically looking for posts to counter government official narratives. Think about that. And they're calling it disinformation. So they will punish, marginalize those who are creating these content. So I just wanted to ask you that because what Jacob said is absolutely true. Here it's being done in a different way. Granted, I don't think anybody voted for Anthony Blinken. He was just put in there. So your thoughts on that? He wants to bring that AI, incredible, powerful department through AI.
What is really dangerous here is what Jacob was talking about. It's the merger of government and business to take away our rights. They're cooperating each other. Right now, it's strained still because we have some businesses that don't want to be involved. But if you go back to that agenda, the agenda said all businesses will be managed by the state or owned by the state. I think owned. I think it's owned, and so corporations will be able to run roughshod. They may not have to worry about environmental laws anymore. I mean, like China, they say they're from the earth, but they are now producing more CO2 than the rest of the world combined with their newest factories and newest power plants. Just came out. How much CO2 they're producing. Like, I think CO2 is a life gas, but anyway, but that merger that we're having is never happened before. I mean, there were times where the government had to fight against business for our freedoms, but now here they're trying to cooperate together because here in America, it was BlackRock and Vanguard that were trying to implement some of this. They wanted to do it to create this DEI things, but it failed because people were standing against it, and corporations became boycotted, and they lost billions of dollars. So now, with the government and these guys cooperating, this is going to be an iron fist on America. It's going to be an iron fist on the world. And because business will cooperate with the government will cooperate with them, and they have one goal: to control the people.
Yeah, it says all business is run by the state. All business is run by the state. Sandy, I want to go over to you real quick because all these believers, that obviously we live in this world. We're not of this world, but we live in it. And obviously, the curtail of the First Amendment here, it doesn't just mean free speech. If you read the First Amendment, obviously it says that the right to worship. So it is going to affect how we preach, how we teach, what we put content we put online, especially more and more as ministries have so much outreach online. Your thoughts on where this is going to go and how it's going to affect believers in evangelism in the future?
Yeah, well, it's already happening.
Yeah.
And, I'm watching how Google, especially Google, is obviously has an AI going, following my ministry and Jacob's and other people's ministries. And they have a very quick response time if we put up something that they don't like. And they find a way to disallow it or take it off or whatever they decide to do. So, this is what's been going on for quite some time in a number of these companies, Microsoft, et cetera. This is why they don't like Elon Musk, because Elon Musk basically, bought out, what's the name?
Twitter, X.
Yeah, and made it into X, and he's allowing people to actually exercise their free speech on there, and they really hate that. Yeah. So the whole thing is going that direction. The news media has been co-opted long ago. Pretty much all parts of our society, the teachers' unions, et cetera, have been co-opted by this Marxist government that wants to control what people think and what they do and what they buy and what they eat and where they go and how far they can go. You look at these electric vehicles, which are pretty much useless if you want to travel anywhere. But they're going to save the planet. This is one of my big pet peeves, is this whole save the planet thing. To me, that's one of the most evil things that's come along. This whole idea that we can actually save the planet. And, I always tell these guys, no, you can't save the planet. That's the whole point. This is why Jesus has to come back, because he is going to save the planet. We can't do it. We're not smart enough to do it. But the government wants to be able to control all that stuff. They want people to quit eating meat, you know, because cows burp, and then that basically changes the ozone layer. I mean, these guys are crazy. It's all based on non-science.
Yes.
None of it's based on science at all.
No.
So I guess the greater question, I think, for believers is, as these things encroaching. Will we have the courage to speak the truth about Jesus when
We've got to? We have to.
Oh,
We don't have a choice. That's our job. We have to speak the truth.
Yeah, and I'm encouraging believers to do it, because I think there are many who would maybe fearful and maybe submit to this system.
Look at what happened to the early church people. So many of them, including the original apostles, they got martyred for speaking the truth. But I'll tell you what, they still stood up and spoke the truth. And because of that, many people got saved.
Praise
so
the
it's
Lord.
our job to be light and salt in this world. And sometimes it's going to cause some pain for ourselves, but we've got to do it. We don't have a choice.
Yeah, I like the hat that you're wearing, Sandy. It's absolutely true. And that's going to come. Jacob, I want to go over to you real quick, because as you see this encroaching, people don't really are paying attention to it, or they may be paying attention to it. But if they submit to a theology that says, well, don't worry about this stuff, we'll be out of here before it happens, I think people to be able to stand and have the courage to speak the truth with power.
That is the reason you have Satan has raised up the pre-tribulational delusion. He does not want the elect to be prepared for what's coming. So he tells them, don't worry about it. You won't be here. You have to be concerned about identifying the Antichrist. You don't have to suffer. You're a king's kid is the name it and claim it version of it. But it all comes from the same kind of thing. What you basically have are people who choose to ignore the realities of both scripture and church history, that most believers in most places have been persecuted. But they think because they're born in a Protestant democracy, they don't have to be persecuted because they never have been. And they're just rewriting their theology to suit their own historical cultural experience. But Jesus said, you'll be hated by all nations for my name's sake. Pre-trib is a lie of the devil to be perpetrated against the elect in order to render as many Christians as possible not ready for what's coming.
I totally agree. And the other shoe that comes along with that is Calvinism. Calvinism has absolutely invaded most of the denominations in the U.S. these days. And people are, they get comfortable. Oh, I can just sit back, I don't have to do anything. I'm once saved, always saved, My sins are forgiven, past, present, and future. All these sayings that they have.
But also,
which are deadly dangerous.
The Lord knows who's going to be saved, and they're the elect, and they're going to be saved anyway, so we don't have to worry about evangelism.
Right. Why worry?
Yeah.
You know what? Me worry. And it's like, you actually have to get out there and preach the gospel, man. You can't just sit back in the pew, and be okay. But, I've said this before. I've actually heard some of these guys, I think it was Charles Stanley said I have the audio tape of it. He said in a radio interview, this lady called up and she says, I'm a Christian, but I'm going to commit suicide. Will I still go to heaven? He said, yeah, you'll still go to heaven. And I'm like, first of all, that's really bad advice. But second of all, isn't suicide self-murder? This is bad. That's their whole idea, though. You can do anything you want to do. This is why MacArthur said you can take the mark and still go to heaven.
Yes.
That's not what the Bible says at all.
Nope, that's MacArthur.
David, I want to go over to you because these theologies are being raised up. Like there's a wide range of believers who are getting into annihilationism, obviously pre-tribulationism, obviously what Jacob talked about, word of faith. It all seems to like we're gearing up to this. Let's escape. We don't have to deal with it. We don't have to deal with it. And yet, as Jacob quoted from Jesus himself, He says, yeah, there will be persecution. In this world, you will have tribulations. You're going to have to deal with it. And yet he has overcome the world. Yet we're promised victory. If we endure, if we suffer with them, we shall reign with them. David, your thoughts on it? Because you've seen this transition over the years, and now it's more and more, I guess I hate to say the word, but it's just more across the board now within biblical denominations and theologies like this.
Of course, Jesus is speaking to the true church and the true believers. But I believe that the apostate, compromising church will, when they're faced with making a choice, they will take the easy way out.
Mm-hmm.
They will compromise. And they won't face the persecution because they'll just say, oh, no, that's not what I mean. And they'll go along with the world and the devil and the government and everything evil. It's already started. We're seeing, the infection within the body. We're seeing the apostasy of the church worldwide. So they won't stand in the day of the testing.
No.
The foolish virgins, as Jacob always says, are going nowhere. So it'll only be the people that are of the Lord and fear him instead of the one that can kill the body.
That's
that
right.
Stand up.
Along with this, we've got this sort of thing. I think it really kind of comes out of Word of Faith theology that, we're kind of like, we're at the top of the evolutionary ladder in terms of Christians. We're the end times Christians. We're the most blessed generation, and all this kind of stuff. But you better be ready, man, because the Bible talks over and over again about we have to continue in the faith, hold on till the end,
Yep.
Yeah, what happened?
So Marco, I believe for a long, long time, most of my Christianity, I believe that my generation, Jacob and my generation, we were the ones that brought in abortion. 1972, it was ruled, it came in. People had been standing for it, wanting it, and so it came in. And because we brought in the death of all these millions and millions of children here in America since that time, I always believed, I'm not teaching this doctrine, I always believed it would be my generation that would see some of God's wrath on us because of what we've done. We were strong of heart, strong of body back then, but now we're older, weaker, and this judgment can come on us at a time when we're not strong.
So the only thing that we have as Christians and the encouragement that we have is submitting to the Word of God and submitting to Jesus and proclaim his Son while we're still time, that we still have time to preach him, and just being ready and having the courage to do it now. Because you don't have the courage to do it now, you won't have the courage to do it later. You need to prepare in your heart and mind, like Daniel, to do it. We hit the hour mark. I wanted to welcome those who are watching live and thanking you for being with us, catching up with Jacob, episode 202. We have Sandy visiting with us today as a special guest, and we also have David Lister and Jay. Davey's not here; he's enjoying a time off. And Davey, God bless you, enjoying your time off today in Australia. But we do want to make sure that you catch us on Backstage. Backstage, we will not be on YouTube and Facebook for those, but we'll be on all the other ones, including Rumble. If you want to ask questions, we got a lot of questions. Send them through Rumble chat. I almost feel like not telling them to send questions. We have so much of a reservoir, but nonetheless, please send the questions in. We will get to them. We will get to every single question. I did want to switch gears. Jacob was actually, what am I saying? Sandy, start with you. Since you're so close to what happened with the hurricane, Elena, and the impact on the southeast of the United States, basically southern Appalachian, obviously Florida. Obviously, we have Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, where you live, East Tennessee. So there is a catastrophe, biblical and apocalyptic.
It really is. I mean,
we have very few help coming through the government. Go ahead.
I have never seen anything like that here. Having been a missionary on Guam and going through 7 huge typhoons in 2 months, I've seen it all out there, but I've never seen anything like that here. And it was a Category 4 hurricane. It made landfall up there, down in Florida, and then it came right up the middle of the country there. It had a huge swath that it came right through sort of the Smoky Mountains, and the people up there were not ready for it at all. And they hadn't seen a hurricane that big since, I think it was in the 1700s is when they had one that was that big. There are at least 200 people that have been killed, and they are expecting many, many more because so many of the places got hit with mudslides. There's some 600 people that are unaccounted for at this point. So they're expecting, it could be 1,000 people have died in this. Just be praying that they can find these people. Most of these places up there, Asheville and that area, are without power still. They're without water. And, I learned pretty quickly on Guam, when you got to go 2 weeks without power and water, without power is no problem. Without water is a big problem.
Yep.
And we used to actually, we found a certain type of soap that you could actually go down to the ocean and take a bath down there, and it would actually lather up. We did that a lot when we had these big, huge typhoons down there. There are, just many things going on. Tennessee also.
Yep.
And lest I forget that, there's, they had on the French Broad River in Asheville, it peaked at 24.67 feet.
Wow.
I can't even imagine that. But I remember seeing a guy on the news pointing to a 2-story building, and he said, "Look at where the water line is," and it was about 24 feet up on the building. I've never seen anything like that before. Mm-hmm. It's no wonder these places got, these whole houses got washed away and everything that happened. They had, even in Georgia, they had 11 inches of rainfall. The storm surge in Florida was 15 feet. It was unbelievable. There were something like 20 reported tornadoes across Georgia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Virginia, and West Virginia. That's what can happen during these hurricanes. You can get these tornadoes. Of course, there's debris everywhere, smashed vehicles. The roads are completely broken up. They can't even get into a lot of these places. And up there in the mountains, there are some like little conclaves of where people live, and they can't even get to them yet. And they're really trying to fix those things. But unfortunately, the actual government is not doing as much as they could be doing. They finally sent in some army or something personnel, and they're trying to help out, but they really need big help. And so it's more than 4 million customers lost power. It's pretty amazing. Let's see if I can find anything else.
Still over 1 million without power, even a week later.
Yeah.
A week later, they're still. I mean, there's places they can't get to, to fix the power. They actually, unfortunately, here in North Carolina, they told the churches to quit sending stuff up there. Don't send any more trucks because, well, it's true. It's really hard to get those trucks through. But I mean, people are trying to give. They really are being very giving down here. They're like certain churches are just getting together and hiring a truck and filling it full of stuff and sending it up there. So I'm thankful for that. I'm also thankful for Elon Musk, who allowed them to use his Starlight system or whatever that's called.
Starlink, yeah.
Starlink, so they could communicate outside. And I'm not a huge fan of Franklin Graham, but his organization is doing a really good job of helping out. He's very much geared for that kind of stuff. And so I'm hoping that more people will donate to them. And also, they're actually looking for people to go up there. So people can contact Franklin Graham, and they will try to get you over there to help out.
Yeah, that's Samaritan's Purse.
Samaritan's Purse, that's correct.
If you go on X, there's some churches that put their address and things, small Baptist churches up there that are trying to be helpful. The Starlinks are being set up on places that do have power, such as fire stations and buildings that are left, so that are connected, so that people can come and then get connected up with their loved ones, let them know they're okay. But from some of the stories and things I've been reading, there may be over 500 or 1,000 more bodies not reported.
That's what they're thinking.
Yeah, that this is going to be enormous because this. I seen this one picture, a wall of mud coming 60, 70 miles an hour down the mountain, just wiping out everything. And
so scary.
Yeah, but there's some great stories. A man's got a packed mule train. He's hauling supplies up the sides of mountains like that with his mules. There's stories of doctors just walking up into to places where they know people are living but can't get out. So
yeah.
There's some amazing personal stories that are going to come out of this and everything.
That's correct.
But what we do know is that FEMA has fallen down. Our Federal Emergency Management Act is missing in action.
Well, they gave $1 billion basically to help out illegal aliens. So they're running out of money.
Yeah, $9 million. So, it is true. Mayorkas came out and said FEMA has no money, but they've been sending a lot of money that was set up for this kind of rescue and disaster relief to illegal migrants. So they don't have any money. So they're offering $750 to the victims of this hurricane. Very similar to what happened in Maui.
That's nothing.
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying?
In comparison to the trillions to Ukraine and other places.
They should be held accountable for this because that fund was not set up for that, to go to illegal aliens. You know what I'm saying?
But they move money around. And look, there's $42 billion that is sitting somewhere for the use of connecting up broadband. Why doesn't the Congress pass an emergency act? Take away, like $5 billion of it. There's $42 billion there. Not one person in 3.5 years has been hooked up to the internet under that program. That money is somewhere, and that was managed by Harris. But they could, if they would come back to their jobs and be in session, they could pass to transfer some of that money over to FEMA, so that we can get help, and also we're hearing people speak through civilians, military men speak through civilians, that they're told, the military has been told to stand down.
Yeah.
They want them to go in.
Yeah, we do have some information right here. David just came in that they're not even allowing them to start up the Starlink right now because they're not allowing them because there's no helicopters are allowed in this. They're allowed by FEMA and the FAA. So they're throttling anybody, even Starlink, in order for them to contact other people. So this just came through, and it is not just falling down, David. They're actually getting in the way of the just absolutely crazy. 9,000 per immigrant, and yet $750 for those who have suffered that. I have an aunt in North Carolina. The brother Sandy lives in North Carolina, so we're getting some, very key information to what's going on there, and they're not even allowing them to fly and rescue. We've heard from the Save Our Allies organization, who goes and search and rescue, because of a photo op with Biden. They weren't allowed to fly. So,
Agent Kennedy is up there. But is up there trying to rescue people by boat and helicopter and everything. And and they promised any FEMA official that comes up and interferes with their operation a tour of the bayou. So,
Well,
one-way tour of the bayou down there in Louisiana. So,
Well, Sandy, the head of FEMA is the head of Homeland Security, Mayorkas. So he's been a traitor. He's been a traitor. We know that. And now he's telling FEMA, saying, we don't have any money, so we're not going to be able to fund any of these, not just operations, but just any money for people that have been victims of this.
and
So
then on top of it,
individuals
most of
who are
those
doing it.
people who own houses up there, they didn't have any kind of flood insurance because they were never expecting there to be a flood
or
Well, it's
even
one of those-
insurance for that matter.
or even insurance. Yeah.
That's one of the poorest areas in the country, South Appalachia, one of the poorest country areas in our country. So they were hit very hard. What troubled me, David, I'll go back to you, is some of the responses you've seen on video of these, I would say, young millennials, young people who were absolutely, I mean, they have to have left their brains somewhere. They're saying because this happened to people that were primarily Caucasian, then they were racist. So this was good that happened to them. Others were saying the spirit of a black woman was in the hurricane and it wiped out people that were not black. I mean, it sounds so ridiculous, but people believe it. Go to you, David.
These young people, liberal, I got to put that in there because. And they're cold. That young lady, very beautiful young lady, has one of the ugliest hearts I've ever seen. One of the ugliest hearts, saying that when she heard this news, that good, we got him, we got some of these racists. How does she know who these people are? She's probably never been out of her parents' basement, And then there was this black man thinking that every one of those white people that's up in that mountain is racist. But how about they're not all white up there in Appalachia.
No, they aren't.
It's a poor area and they suffer, but they don't ask for much. I'm hearing a story of a woman. She's very poor, had nothing, lost everything. But she says, look, my house is up. I'm okay. I don't want anything from you. I have neighbors up the road. Go take care of them, please.
Yeah.
It's not like they're greedy or anything like that. They want to live and be left alone.
Hearts.
Yeah.
And I'm seeing this problem, the bigotry problem, of course, with millennials and that sort of age group, but I'm also seeing, I have a family member, I'm not going to mention who it was, but they said, I was talking about these ridiculous wind turbines they're putting up in the middle of the Atlantic. And I was questioning, I'm saying, isn't that going to negatively impact the marine life and all that? Isn't that, aren't ships going to run into those things, when it's rough? And he got really mad at me. He basically said, well, your generation is going to be gone pretty soon, and then we're going to fix everything.
Yeah.
That's their attitude.
Yep. Not only that, but the solar, you were seeing these hundreds of millions of dollars for solar powered fields. Texas wiped out in one day 90% of the whole field. One of the largest solar projects. In Nevada, one just got wiped out over there. The largest one that they put out at sea, solar, was wiped out. Hundreds of millions and billions of dollars for solar power.
Yeah.
And yet a storm comes along and they're destroyed.
And they're done. Yeah.
And they're done.
If I may, just telling you from what happened in Houston, where I grew up, by the logic of this girl who's saying what she's saying, Katrina must have been a very racist hurricane because generally speaking, the people who were forced to move from Louisiana happen to be majority dark-skinned people.
Yes.
So obviously, the hurricane was doing God's will then too, going against the poor minorities of Louisiana. I mean, this is a person that doesn't think. This is a person that has no experience in life, and like you said, probably has never experienced what it means to be, I don't know, told how stupid they are.
Yeah, that's right. But
Houston,
it's so isn't it interesting how these people who are so bigoted against white people are they themselves are bigoted, and so
right.
they don't see that it's their problem.
Yes.
Yeah, Houston sent buses for all those underprivileged people and brought them to Houston.
Correct.
Of thousands.
Did. Yeah.
Gave them housing.
Yes, they did. And it forever changed Houston. In fact, Houston on that day went from being somewhat purplish to deep, almost blue.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Well, they when you see a situation like this happen, and all of these churches who are basically different denominations getting together to help out, that should make some people kind of a little less judgmental about churches.
Yes.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, I was going to talk about a little bit more about the strike on the longshoremen, but they were able to settle for another date. I think it runs into January 25th, 2025. So it won't be shut down. We will talk about that at another time, because I think the automation part is really fascinating, and what AI is going to come in and automate these ports, which is in the rest of the world has automation already. Those 36 ports are one of the most inefficient ones, which it caused the price of goods to go up because they just are not efficient. They've been fighting automation for quite a long time. We'll talk about another time, because I did want to get to another pressing issue. And Sandy, you can talk a little more about this, because when last week we talked a little bit about Calvary Chapel, actually, for at least 30 minutes. And it was about my granddaughter, oldest granddaughter of Calvary, of Chuck Smith, who was answering a question regarding the split between Global Network and Brian Broderson, in Costa Mesa, and CCA. And then she explained it well, and I think it was a very godly response.
She's got a good video up on YouTube. Also of Paul Smith.
Yeah, asked us to pray about it and keep seeking the Lord and continue to preach the gospel and things like that. So I did want to ask you some questions, because one of the issues we didn't address were two of them, which comes in with the Global Network, which has to do with missions. And in this particular situation would be Danny Lehman from YWAM, who has a lot of influence in missions. And I did want to talk also about the gay single and Christianity.
Oh, boy.
By Mr. Cole. Yeah, that book that comes in. So let's deal with the Danny Lehman stuff first, the missions, and how you have a lot of history with him and know him and things like that. So go ahead.
Jacob and I have had a long history with that boy. And, it's difficult, especially since both of us were very much involved in Calvary Chapel. I mean, he was involved all the way back in 1970, some in that era of the Jesus movement. And actually, I was down there during that time as well, and happened to meet a guy I'm going to mention in a minute. But, I looked on their website at Costa Mesa, and now Brian and Char Broderson are listed as senior pastors there. And, of course, Char is very liberal. And both those guys have been espousing teachings of the emerging church and NAR and also YWAM. And that's partly because of the influence of Danny Lehman, who has continued to be a pastor in the Calvary Chapel Church. He's now the Oceania director of YWAM. He's also a big supporter of a group called the Loa Keakua that is teaching people that they need to go back and worship the god Io in Hawaii. On Lehman's website, he says that he sought out the support of the community to maintain his commitment to moving to Shekinah House and outreach of Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa. While there, he began to share his faith on the beaches and streets. He also assisted in planting a church, Mission Christian Fellowship, and founded something called The Land, a Christian community emphasizing evangelism and discipleship. Well, guess who was this guy who started The Land? That was Lonnie Frisbee. Yeah, it turns out, and he's admitting it on his website. It turns out the layman was a close personal friend with Lonnie Frisbee, and so it makes me wonder if he really did quit drugs. But he's been involved in that ever since then, and to this day continues to be a pastor at the CC Honolulu, and travels to many of the Calvary chapels around the country, doing men's conferences, where he's always an advocate for NAR teachers of the third wave counterfeit revivals. He's just like,
Mr. Michael Brown.
Michael Brown, those two guys are extremely dangerous. And I can guarantee you that Broderson has been very influenced by Danny Lehman, as well as many of the other pastors. I've shared this before, but Danny brought in Aloha into the Calvary Chapel Honolulu, and he brought in Aloha, and so they proceeded to worship Io in song and in message.
The Hawaiian volcano god.
Yeah, well, that's Pele, but Io is supposedly this secret god that nobody knew about, and of course, nobody knew about it because he didn't exist. Io is actually the name of a hawk, and they were actually worshiping a hawk. But anyway, I wrote to Bill Stonebreaker. I wrote to Chuck Smith. I said, "Do you know that this went on? And what do you think about somebody worshiping a demon in your church?"
Right.
And of course, it went straight into the round file.
And I think you went in behind it, didn't you, Sandy?
Yep. And we
got rid of you.
I brought Jacob over, and we did a discernment conference in that church. And Jacob had the audacity to tell them, "You better quit hanging out with the wrong people." He was talking about Jehoshaphat and Ahab. It was right on point. And he said, "If you keep doing that, you guys are going down." Well, first of all, there was not one person of the leadership at our conference, so they never even heard what Jacob said, except that Danny Lehman went around behind their backs and told them a bunch of stuff about Jacob and said that he was demonic and all this kind of stuff. It was horrible. Wow. Anyway, I found out, they were promoting Aloha Keakua's book at Honolulu Calvary Chapel, and they had it on the shelf. And so I went and I complained to the bookstore manager, and he said, "Okay, well, we'll look into that." So I went back a couple of weeks later, and it was gone. So I was, "Oh yeah, that's great. I'm glad you pulled that," because I told him in that book, Daniel Kagawa says that the Polynesians were part of the lost tribe of Israel. So, so then I went back in, and it was back in the store again. And not only that, but my mom's book was in the store, and somebody, I'm guessing Danny, surreptitiously put her book right next to that book. These people are annoying. But anyway, their bookstores have been a big problem. They had Jesus Calling in their bookstore. They had the Holy Ghost film that was done that I did two separate reviews on DVD. It's up on my website. Broderson has said that it's okay to attend a homosexual wedding, and as long as they're Christians. If they're Christians, it's okay. Greg Laurie posted a video standing with the New Age advocate Roma Downey. He's big buddies with them. He's also big buddies with a whole bunch of heretics on TBN. Calvary Chapel pastors, they refuted praying to the dead, but Calvary Chapel affiliate Steve Berger encouraged talking to the dead.
Yes.
The there was this person who wrote a letter in and said they were very dismayed with Calvary Chapel Church pushing Calvinism through the New City Catechism. So they're using that. Calvary Chapel has been platforming homosexual activists to push politics. They did kind of something the same thing out where I was going at the time in Honolulu. At that time, I was attending Calvary Chapel Pearl Harbor, and the pastor was gone on a trip, and they brought in this lady who was running for office, and she came in and she completely gave rave reviews to what's her name? The false prophetess of the NAR.
Cindy Jacobs.
Yes, Cindy Jacobs. And she was saying that, it was really true what she was saying about Hawaii, because at the time she gave a false prophecy that said that all of Hawaii, every single person in Hawaii was going to be saved.
Yeah. Hey, Sandy, I want to go back to the Danny Lehman stuff.
Yes.
Far away from that, because it is really a hindrance. And what he really did is he corrupted evangelism and mission, right? And so it affected Calvary Chapel mission. So you were a missionary out in Hawaii for a long time.
That's right.
Pacific. How did it change? What did you see in the changes in terms of missionary, how mission work was approached?
It's very sad because the whole... what can I say? It's the World Christian Gathering of Indigenous People movement has very much affected all of the islands, all the nations out in Asia, and pretty much everywhere. This is why I wrote a book with Mike Oppenheimer called "Idolatry in Their Hearts." It was a play on eternity in their hearts.
Bill Richardson's book.
Richardson. And when we read his book, I couldn't believe what that guy was doing. I mean, he went out the same year as my parents did, 1962. And we used to go to the villages and witness to people. There was a couple of villages that had never heard the gospel, literally at that time. And they actually, a bunch of people got saved and they started a church. And, my parents were responsible for that. And yet, Don Richardson, he was over there in Papua New Guinea, or I can't remember, not Papua New Guinea, but the other one, Irian Jaya. And he claimed that he couldn't make people understand the gospel. And so then he started telling people, I'm going to make up this name here. Goomba told me to bring you this message. And so then he made up this whole mythology that kind of sounded like the gospel, but it wasn't really the gospel. And that was his way of doing things. Well, that stuff metastasized into this movement that we encountered out there, which basically their whole thing is, we didn't need the missionaries to come out here. We already had a way to make things right between us and the Lord, because we already were worshiping Eo,
Yes.
And I'm like, no, wrong. They actually stole Eo from down there in New Zealand, from the Maoris, and made up this whole mythology. So they started telling people to go back in their history, find a supreme being, and then that was God. And they've always been worshiping God ever since Babel. They brought the worship of the true God into the whole world, And I'm going, no, they didn't. What they brought was polytheism to the whole world. You go back and look at all of the old religions, and that's what you'll find. It's a male and female deity spawning other deities. So that was the problem. I would advise people to get that book, Idolatry in Their Hearts. And also with regard to Lonnie Frisbee, I would point you to an article by Mike Oppenheimer. He did a detailed article on Lonnie Frisbee and what that guy was all about. And it was not good, actually.
Yeah.
I give anything that happened good in the Jesus movement was because of Chuck Smith.
Yes.
He actually preached the gospel. He let the long-haired hippies come in, and they got saved, etc. So, but yes, to just wrap up on
Andy,
on Danny, he has been one of the worst things that's happened to many of the churches, not just Calvary Chapel, but he's been out there. He was recommending Rick Joyner books and all kinds of stuff. He invited that guy, guy who's the head of one of the heads of Knights of Malta, to come out, and which Rick Joyner and Paul Kane are members of. They came out and spoke in Calvary Chapel. I said,
General Boykin? Is that General Boykin?
Boykin.
Yeah.
And I said, don't you know what this guy's about? He's a complete dominionist. He's teaching dominionism to you guys. He said, we need to take over the world, literally. So he's been promoting all this garbagey stuff in all the Calvary chapels for a long time. And we warned them so many times. Jacob, me, Mike, many others, Chris Lawson, and Roger Oakland and many others warned about what this guy was out there doing. But nobody would listen to us.
Stanley, I think that Youth with a Mission was a major platform for what Danny Lehman did.
Yes.
yeah,
Absolutely. And they
YWAM, yeah.
they basically opened themselves up to the New Apostolic. And in fact, when they got established down there in Palau, where I came from, they brought Lauren Cunningham out there to Palau. I couldn't believe it. And so he's like, they're all getting friendly with these guys who are just, that guy's a false prophet.
yes,
And, of course, we had John and Joy Dawson, who were very much involved with YWAM. YWAM is the one who was always involved in helping out with the Benny Hinn Crusades and all that stuff,
And I wanted to ask you another question, which is obviously the effect that the mission work of Global One Network and missions in the Calvary Chapel. He's still very much involved there with Danny Lehman, and we see the damage that he's done. Because I think even now the changes are that I think they call them missional, not missionary. Basically, have to be relational. We'll come back to that one another time. But I did wanted to ask you about the other, I guess, elephant in the sanctuary, which is the Single Gay Christian, which is a book by Greg Cole, which is been allowed within the Global One Network to be talked about, to be taught. Obviously, Preston Sprinkle, which is connected to a Calvary Chapel up in Idaho, brought this in. And although the CCA has not taken a stand on it, they allow the churches to kind of sort of take their own stand, as far as I know. The Global One has allowed this theology, what I think is called Series B theology, which is basically the fact that they don't promote homosexual marriage, but they do allow single gay Christian as long as they're not
side B theology.
Theology. That's right.
Called. And,
so can you comment on that real quick on Global One and the allowing this into the churches?
This is what's so bad, and unfortunately, they have allowed this stuff into their Bible, into their bookstores. The evangelical dark web is one of the foremost outlets warning about side B theology, and they're doing a good job. But there's pastors have left the Calvary Chapel Association because they're embracing it, and it's just like the first step, basically. Well, you can be married. You can be married if you're married and homosexual. That's okay, Well, the next thing is you don't have to be married. You can see it all coming. So this often starts with the bookstores, and we were always trying to help the bookstores to make sure they were selling the right stuff. You would not believe some of the stuff they've had in their bookstores all along. They had Bruce Wilkinson's Prayer of Jabez in there. And I had to argue with the pastor there at Pearl Harbor, and he got red-faced mad at me. How dare you? You can't say that. This book is just fine. And then 2 weeks later, the book disappeared. But I never got to thank for that. All I got was, they wanted to ostracize me.
Well, that's usually the process. Isn't it? Sandy, I also wanted to ask you about the Preston Sprinkle, which is a big promoter of this gender, sexuality, and faith, and he's very influenced by N.T. Wright. So there's a lot of influence of N.T. Wright within the Calvary Chapel,
Yes.
Especially the global one, because they need a theologian to sort of discuss some of these things that they're going.
Yeah.
N.T. Wright has become sort of the flavor of their month. Maybe a year now. He's influenced some of these pastors and teachers, and you can see the fruit of that labor.
Yeah. Yep. That's how it goes. And
I'm familiar with N.T. Wright from England. And although I very often disagree with John MacArthur, what John MacArthur said about N.T. Wright on the video available on YouTube is exactly right. It's exactly right. Also, he's, of course, very much replacement theology, which is something that Brian Broderson and Calvary Chapel Costa Mesa has embraced now formally, denies the prophetic significance of contemporary events in the Middle East, and it is a marked departure from the longstanding position held by the founders of Calvary, especially Chuck. So this is what you're dealing with. But N.T. Wright he's just a babbling theocrat. A babbling theocrat. I don't even know if he's a believer. I don't know if he isn't, but babbling theocrat.
yeah. Yep, that's the problem. These guys are just accepting all these winds of doctrine, lots of winds. And unfortunately, people like Danny Lehman are bringing them right in. And people think, oh, he's okay. They love him because he's one of these kind of guys who can really put on a show on stage, and he's really good at telling all these stories, and people, oh, that was so good, He got up there one time during one of the conferences out in Honolulu, and he told this story, and I didn't really believe it was his story. And then I looked it up, and sure enough, he had ripped it off from somebody else. But it's the story that he was speaking at a conference, and he had to go to the bathroom. So he went from the stage to the bathroom, and he was in there. And then all of a sudden he realized he had his mic on. Now that is a funny story. But the thing is, I didn't believe that the guy was telling it. I didn't believe it was his story when he was telling it, but he's very good. And the youth like him, he talks like that. He's always saying, hey, I'm stoked, and he uses all this lingo, but he just absolutely hated our guts, because we stood up to him, and of course we both, all of us basically ended up having to leave Calvary Chapel.
Yep, I understand that.
Anymore. Yeah.
Well, you didn't leave Calvary Chapel. They forced you out.
They forced us out. Yep.
And as far as Jacob, after he finished that sermon, a bunch of Calvary Chapel pastors across the nation publicly called him out.
Yep.
On that sermon.
Yep.
Didn't know the doctrine, said he was wrong for saying it from the pulpit of a Calvary Chapel. And then Jacob was vindicated by Chuck Smith, who 3 weeks later came and did a sermon called Beware the Wolves.
Yeah.
That went kind of along the lines of what Jacob was saying.
Yeah.
And he said, he was right for saying it.
I'll tell you what, I was sitting there in the audience listening to Jacob, and two things occurred to me. Number one, he is going to be crucified for saying this.
Well,
and number two, he's not saying that this is prophecy, but this is absolute prophecy from the Holy Spirit. Because this is what I believe, that when a person is exegeting the Bible correctly and applying it correctly to current circumstances, the Holy Spirit is speaking, man. You better listen.
Yeah. Amen. Amen. You can still find that video. It's still online. It's called the Chick in the Armor. Chick in the Armor.
Chink
Absolutely.
in the armor, man. A
Yeah.
great message.
Yeah, and then it's the one from Hawaii that's actually the
Yep.
one that Sandy's talking about. So
Yeah.
very good. All right. Thank you, Sandy, so much for that update. We are going to close out the episode and go to backstage. We got lots of questions, lots of good stuff. Stuff from back from last week, left over. Some new ones, Deep Reservoir. We're going to do the best we can to get through them. So we appreciate your questions, and we'll see you on backstage in just a couple of minutes.
Hello, and thank you for watching Moriel TV. There are so many things that are happening at Moriel Ministries worldwide, from the Philippines to Japan to India to Africa and back to Europe and the United States. So many of our brothers and sisters are spreading the good news of Jesus Christ to this lost world. We are so thankful for your prayers. God has been faithful and has blessed us in so many ways. If you'd like to partner with our efforts abroad and at home, please take a moment to click the link in the description and help us as the Lord leads you. Thank you very much, and God bless.